Hi, welcome to Built in the Bush. My name's Tanya Atkinson. I'm an executive coach and growth and transition facilitator, and one of the absolute privileges that I get in my job is I get to hear the personal stories of how people got to be where they are today and what made them successful, and how sometimes the things that went wrong are really the things that went right for us and set us up to be where we are today. The whole point of the podcast is to share those ups and downs, to share their personal stories, but also to hopefully give you the inspiration and the motivation to realise that you can follow your dreams and your purpose. There are way too many different jobs in this world and way too many different people for us to be doing a job that we don't enjoy most of the time. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hi, Michael Atkinson. Thanks for making the time and joining us today. So Michael is, actually I'll let you introduce yourself and your role, Stan Sport, and then we'll talk about how I know you and your journey to where you are today.
Oh, I was quite looking forward to seeing how you'd introduce me. I am a presenter, host for Stan Sport. So I'm the lead host on the rugby broadcast on Stan Sport and Channel 9, Super Rugby Pacific, Super Rugby Women's, the Wallabies Test matches, Wallaroos Test matches, and the like. But I'm also a general sports broadcaster, so rugby is probably 90% of what I do, but I have covered the Olympics for Stan and I've covered boxing for Stan Sport as well. And yeah, I get to just branch out into a few different sports. Yep,
nice. And if people haven't picked up or don't already know us, Michael's actually my younger brother. He's the rose between the four thorns of sisters that he has. And whilst Michael's role is probably traditionally successful, what I wanted to share with people today and to go through is the path that he took to get there certainly wasn't traditional, and it certainly wasn't the path that was meant to get you to where you wanted to and to the successes that you've already enjoyed. So before we jump into that, the podcast is called Built in the Bush for a reason. So built in, where were you made?
I was made in St George.
Actually, you were created. You were designed in St George, yeah.
Designed in St George. First created in St George, but made in Quilpie, in southwestern Queensland. Lived there for 12 years. I think from about the age of 2 to 14.
And then fine-tuned. Where after that? Where else?
Fine-tuned boarding school in Brisbane. Did 6 years of boarding school in Brisbane, most of that at Marist College, Ashgrove.
So I'm going to take you back a step though, Mikey. Where'd you live after Quilpie?
Dirranbandy for 3 years.
Yep.
Which is 3 tough years of my life.
Yep. And then Toowoomba?
And then Toowoomba,
yeah. And stabled in, so boarding school? Stabled in?
Boarding school, yeah, in Brisbane at Marist College, Ashgrove.
Yep. There was one before that? 1 year?
I did 1 year at boarding at Nudgee College, but going to actual school at St Patrick's at Shorncliffe. Yep. It's a long story, but I did 1 year there, and then I did 5 years at Marist Ashgrove.
Yep. And then debuted in. So where was your first adult role that directed you towards the path that you're on today and where you wanted to end up?
That was probably when I started working at Queensland Rugby Union in 2011 as like a match day operations ticketing assistant. But that is definitely where the foundation, I think, comes from. That's led me to where I am in the media now. Like that was a few years removed past school and that sort of thing. I did some other roles before that, but I'd say that was probably the beginning of where I am now.
Yep. What are some of the pivotal moments that come to mind from your time there that really set you up for where you are today?
At the Queensland Rugby Union? The most pivotal one would be when in 2012 the head of communications started creating their own digital content, Reds TV on YouTube, and they used to do weekly videos sort of summing up the Reds game from the weekend, things that have been happening around the club, as well as club rugby. And she came to me and asked me if I wanted to first voice and then present the club rugby wrap. So it was just sort of 60 minutes of what had happened in club rugby in Brisbane over the weekend, who was playing each other in the weeks to come, how the ladder was looking, that sort of thing. So that was like my first taste of, I guess, presenting, doing some sort of like camera-facing role. There was another really pivotal moment. There was a documentary crew called Onion TV who in 2011 did a short documentary series called The Code, and it was a fly-on-the-wall documentary from inside the Waratahs. And then 2011, the Reds won the title, and in 2012, Onion TV came and did the same style of thing, this time with the Reds. And they focused on different areas of the business as well as the sport, and they came to me and just asked me to say a few lines to camera, but didn't tell me what it was for, and it ended up being like the opening monologue of the whole series, which I didn't know until it aired. So that was pretty cool, and those were two. And the other big pivotal moment was after 2 years working in operations and events, I got promoted to the team manager role of the actual Super Rugby team. And so that just gave me like...
So the Queensland Reds.
For the Queensland Reds. Yep. And so the very abbreviated version of my role was just managing the logistics day to day, week to week, season to season of the players, the coaches, the whole football department. I travelled with them around Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, etc. But through that, I met a lot of people and made a lot of great contacts, which are really paying off now in my role now, working on rugby broadcasts. So they're probably
which
the three
we
most
will
pivotal
get
moments.
to.
Yes.
In a minute. I'll get you just to park that one.
Okay.
And so from there, then you followed a non-traditional path to get to where you are. From memory, you were told you had to have completed a degree, those sorts of things, to be considered for those roles? Or am I remembering that incorrectly?
To be considered for media roles?
For the level that you were hoping to get to, hosting media
roles? It was
roles.
suggested that was like the best path to go down.
Mm-hmm.
It was also kind of pointed out to me by people already working in the industry that the degrees themselves aren't that useful in the industry, but it was suggested like that's the best starting point to go and just at least begin or achieve a tertiary education in media or journalism or communications or something like that.
So you started your degree and were working towards that, but then what were some of the other things you were doing?
I did a lot of work experience. I was 28 when I went back to uni at this point to study media. I did a media and communications degree. It was actually a dual degree initially with business on it as well. But I went back to the Reds. I had left a couple of years earlier. Was no longer working at the organisation. Did a year living in London. It's a different story, but that's just painting the picture of like I hadn't been working at the Queensland Rugby Union, but a friend said, I know you want to do media and I know you're studying, so come back and be a media intern, which was a bit of an exercise in swallowing pride, because I was
about to say at the age of 28 and coming back after being in that position, how do you swallow your pride?
Just have to get over yourself and get on with it.
Yep.
And I really reluctantly did it, but it was the best thing. I actually think it's the best decision I made in this whole process, because I learned some really good skills, like not just in front of camera, but the friend of mine who was working there at the time who encouraged me to come back, he taught me camera operating skills, editing skills, producing, a lot of those sort of things. But it got me back in front of the camera doing some stuff on tape, going back to presenting the club rugby wrap, those sorts of things. And then the guy who got me back, Tom Kennedy, he actually put together a show reel without really telling me what he was doing and sent it to Channel 9 and said, this guy wants to do what you guys do. Can he come and do some work experience? And I got work experience, and the rest is history, which we'll probably go into. And
by work experience, you mean volunteering and essentially going and working for free? It's not paid work experience.
No, it's not paid work experience. So I was, I did about 2 or 3 months at Channel 9, 2 days a week. Yeah, you don't get paid for that. I was doing 2 days a week at the Reds, not getting paid for that. I was also writing articles for their online content, Queensland Rugby Union, about the Reds or players, about club rugby. I was writing articles that were going in their match day program for home matches that the Reds were hosting at Suncorp Stadium. I was also at the time doing a guest spot on a community radio station on Saturday mornings out in the Brisbane Bayside, down Redlands area. That was a 2-hour radio show. I used to drive out there every Saturday morning and do that. There was probably a few others that I can't even think of now, but yeah, I think a lot of people at uni wait until they're nearly finished to start getting work experience, whereas I just wanted to sink my teeth in straight away.
And do you think you'd be where you are now if you hadn't done those things?
No, absolutely not. I'd probably be a couple of years behind. I might be still on the same trajectory, maybe, but I'd be a couple of years behind, I think, particularly because I took on that internship at the Reds, and that ended up in a connection with Channel 9, which was the start of my media career. If I hadn't done that, I don't think I'd be where I am now. I might have ended up having to go and do a news reporting role somewhere in a regional media centre, in a regional section of
not that there's anything wrong with that, but
no,
it would have taken longer to get to where you...
progression. People finish uni, then go and do that for a couple of years or a year, and then end up getting a job in a metro newsroom. And so I probably skipped, 10, 12 rungs on the ladder, I think, by going about it the way I did.
Yep. By giving up your time to learn the craft outside of the formal education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Now, some of the other questions. So, growing up in the bush, it's our experiences that shape our beliefs. So, what are some of the things that you think you learnt growing up, good or bad, that have helped you be resilient, that have helped you be fearless enough to follow a different path?
I think the biggest thing I learned growing up in the bush is independence, because I think in the city kids are not quite as free to do as they please, which is a good thing as well. Do as they please is probably slightly wrong term, but we were very much given freedom by our parents in a country town because it was smaller environment, smaller community. Everyone kind of knew each other. You could
safe back then.
Yeah, exactly. You could just get yourself around town, take yourself to your friends' houses, go riding bikes out in the bush. We rode motorbikes and probably at times rode horses. We went to people's properties, their farms and that sort of thing. And you didn't always feel like you had to be reporting back in, or mum and dad didn't need to be watching your every move. And I just think that it really encouraged us, at least, probably subconsciously, just to be independent. And we were confident enough to find activities to do to occupy our day or entertain our day, outside of the days we were going to school. And like, as a father now living in a big city, my kids wouldn't have that same experience. So I think growing up in the country, you really learn to be independent, really learn to stand on your own 2 feet, and kind of, at that stage it's just finding things to do to occupy your time, but it's the beginning of finding things to do, to achieve, to accomplish, or tasks to take on.
Yep. Agreed. Most influential role model or adults growing up, whether they were teachers, icons, relations, friends?
I just got hit with a wave of emotion. Didn't expect that.
That's good. Yeah, talk me through.
I had a teacher in high school. His name was Tim Baldwin, and he was like a massive guy physically, but metaphorically, like just a big personality, larger than life. He was in his 40s or something when I met him at 13. I don't know. I think I had him as a teacher for a class once, but he was heavily involved in the boarding school, and he was like our head of year 10 boarding when I was in year 10, and then some changes happened at the school and we stayed in the same dorm for year 11, etc. So we got him 2 years in a row, and he was a huge influence on me. Just had a wonderful zest for life, an incredible ability to engage young males in particular. Like, he dedicated his whole life to education and educating young men. He never married, he never had kids, but he was just so invested in the school and in the students and the individuals, and helping produce good young people. And I think he came into my life at a time when I really needed a strong male role model. And he was like a second dad to me. Like, I spent a lot of time away from home, obviously being at boarding school. That's 40 weeks of the year you're living away from home. So he really became my dad away from home. And we maintained a really strong connection and friendship after I left school. He sadly passed away 2010 of a heart attack, and like, I often think about at different times when I could have used his advice or his mentorship in my adult life. So I don't think about it every day, but I do think sometimes about how much I miss him, or how much I would like to be able to show him where I'm at now, or show him my family, my kids. And yeah, like, he was the closest thing I could have had to having a dad without him actually being my dad.
Yeah. And I have no doubt that he's seeing exactly what you're doing, and very proud of you, what you've done in business and in life.
He had great calf muscles. I always admired his calf muscles.
Is that because that's an area you're lacking in, or they were just so spectacular?
They were pretty big. It might be.
No.
He's a wonderful storyteller. Like, I got a lot of my storytelling ability from him, I think.
Yep. Now, we've touched on this earlier, but most successful failures. So the things that you really thought were the worst things that could happen at the time, and now looking back, you can appreciate that actually redirected you onto the path that you're on today, or a path that helped you get to where you are today?
That's a really good question. I've had so many cracks at some post high school qualification, whether it be a university degree or diploma or a certificate. Like, I think I've actually lost count. I reckon it's 5 or 6 times I've started uni, or started a degree, or started a certificate or a diploma, and still not finished any of them. Not that I'm only just
in front of you.
Must be an Atkinson thing. But I reckon I did a personal training course when I was about 21. I was really into fitness and that. I mean, I still am, but I was really into that then. I just pulled out of primary education university degree, and I enjoyed the personal training, but I just didn't take it seriously enough to apply myself to just getting the actual workload done, the theory workload done. And some personal things happened in my life at that time that I just kind of went off the rails a bit and just completely pushed it aside. And
do you want to touch on just what that was?
I had a really good friend die in a tragic accident when I was 21. And one of time that I was
a good schoolmate, and is that right?
Yeah, he's a good schoolmate. Yeah, like a guy.
So they're sort of lifelong
5 years, and I played sport with him. I think we probably played in the same rugby team at school every year, and we were part of the same friendship group outside of school and that sort of thing. And he died in a tragic accident when we were 21. And it was at this time, and it really knocked me for 6, more so than I realised at the time. And I just kind of used it as not used it as an excuse, but I was doing the things that 21-year-olds do. You just party a lot, and that sort of stuff. I don't think I realised at the time I was doing it for those reasons.
None of us do.
I wouldn't have said I was necessarily partying harder than any of my friends or people my age, but I certainly didn't care for any seriousness in my life or wanting to complete this degree.
Yep.
This qualification, and I just ended up getting to the end of its term, and they were like, you've still got 6 more months to hand in all the work, so like it's not like you haven't done now. And I just never touched it. I just didn't bother, and I regretted a little bit, just from the point of view of like that was a bit weak in my opinion to not give it a good crack. And also like my mum had financed it for me, the course, so I felt like I was letting her down. But I do believe a little bit in like things happen for a reason, so that happened, which led me to go down a certain direction of path, which ultimately 3 or 4 steps after that ended up me working at the Queensland Rugby Union, and as we've already discussed, that was kind of the very, very beginning of where I'm at now. So I certainly failed in that area or that part of my life, but
if you hadn't have had that failing at that point in time, you may not have been redirected.
Going down this way, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And what about failing forward? So things that didn't quite work out, and you use them as stepping stones then to actually ensure they work out next time.
There's probably been thousands or millions of those in my life.
Just top 1 or 2 that come to mind.
Top 1 or 2. There's been a few in like the media industry, just like missing out on a role or an opportunity that I desperately wanted. So when the rugby broadcast rights switched hands from Foxtel or Fox Sports at the end of 2020 and came to Nine and Stan, I was like, this is my shot. This is my opportunity. Getting into broadcasting rugby was a big ambition for why I went back to study media and go down this career path. So I was like, this is happening for a reason. And I was really proactive, got on the email and phone to bosses and made them aware of who I was and my connection to rugby, my knowledge, and why I should be considered to be part of the broadcast or commentary team. And I had a lot of positive conversations, but then it sort of got to a couple of weeks or a month before the season and I hadn't really heard anything. And then they did a publicity announcement of who the new Nine rugby team was going to be, and I obviously wasn't part of it. And I had some conversations with people after that, and they're like, "Oh, we really want to use you when we can," and that sort of stuff. But it was very ad hoc, and I was pretty gutted by that. I tried not to let it show too much. I think my wife Sophie knew, and people probably would have had an inkling just because they knew how keen I was on it. But I just didn't let it deter me. Like I was pretty pissed and pretty bitter about it, but I didn't let it the bitterness overcome me, or turn me into being like, we'll stuff you. If you don't want to use me full time, you're not going to use me at all. I just maintained a positive outlook on it and was like, all right, well, you can still find a way to get in. And I just became a pest, really, just like kept communicating with the head of rugby, making sure he was aware that I was always keen, and I was just really proactive. And if a hard conversation had to happen with my news bosses, because I was a sports reporter and presenter for 9 News Queensland at the time, I was more than happy to go and have that conversation and be like, look, how can you help me make this work? And to their credit, my bosses at News were really good at supporting it. But yeah, that was probably an opportunity where I could have just gone, well, stuff ya, and thrown my toys out of the cot. But I
guess that's a great example, because some of the things I see when I'm coaching people is it's how we choose to perceive and respond to those events, whether we want to keep looking at what we missed out on and the bitterness of it and then not see the opportunities in front of us, or as you said, doesn't mean you still didn't like it, but you just make the most of it and keep pushing forward. It's probably a bit humbling too, like maybe I thought I was better than I
was, or I obviously thought I was better than some other people perceived me to be. So maybe like it was also a timely little reality
self-reflection.
check. Yeah, like don't get too ahead of yourself, and
Yep.
because I haven't actually, even now, I haven't been in the media game that long, and at that point it was 4 years ago, so it was even less experience. So some people work 10, 20 years in the media before they get on sports broadcasts, live sports broadcasts, or even presenting on a news desk, which I was doing actually as my first full-time job in news, but I was doing it for Brisbane, like a major metro news, within 18 months. So I did have to sort of stop and check and be like, yeah, well, you've gone a lot further than some other people. It's not like it's all been roadblocks.
Sorry?
It wasn't like it had all been roadblocks. Like I had some good things happen to me too. So.
Yep. But it's still important that you're able to see then. Sometimes when people haven't had those roadblocks and have had a quick trajectory, that can be even more debilitating when you do get that roadblock. So credit to you that you were able to see it for what it was. What about, so there's people and experiences and things that we meet and have as we're growing up, and some of them we don't realise. So we talk about planting trees or planting seeds. Some of them we don't know we're doing. It's not until later on in our life or our career that they come out of the woodwork as a supporter, an advocate, someone that is presenting you with a job opportunity. Where there's some that we knowingly plant and there's some that we unknowingly plant. Are there any that come to mind for you that you knowingly planted or unknowingly planted back in your early days that have reared their heads and helped you get to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. The one that stands out above the rest would be Daniel Herbert, who's the chairman of Rugby Australia now, former Wallaby, won a World Cup 99, etc. When I was working at the Queensland Rugby Union, first started there, he was working at Queensland Rugby Union. I think he was the chief commercial officer. Mm-hmm. And so the 4 years I was at Queensland Rugby, Dan was there as well. And I had no idea I was going to end up where I am now.
And he probably had no idea he was going to end up.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Dan would be okay with me saying this. We clashed a few times in our time at Ballymore. He was a far more senior person than I was, and I was probably a young, hot, upstart. He just got a bit ahead of himself at times with certain business things, and he put me in my place a few times. But to his credit, he's not held a grudge or anything, and we have a really good relationship now with him as chairman of Rugby Australia and me in my role. And even when he was on the board of Rugby Australia, he was a director, not the chair person. At the time, the broadcast rights changed over, and he, I'll never forget this. He called me and was like, "I know this is what you want to do. Like, from our side, if I can advocate for you, would you be comfortable with me doing that? Like, trying to advocate for suggesting that I'd be part of the broadcast team." And that was from the outset of Nine and Stan getting the broadcast rights deal. So, I didn't plant that seed with any. I didn't even knowingly plant it, but I certainly didn't think like it'd be bearing the fruit it is now. And I wouldn't say that like Dan gives me any particular special treatment, but we just have a good relationship, and he's a very high-ranking official at the governing body of the sport that I help broadcast. So, yeah.
And clearly a lot of respect there.
Yeah.
As well. Yep. Any others that you knowingly planted that come to mind?
This is a pretty funny story. It's not as fruitful now.
Yep.
But it was for a while, and that's just purely because this person's role has changed and my role has changed. So Paul White was the CEO of the Broncos for 10 years. Mm-hmm. In Brisbane, the Broncos are the be-all and end-all in sport, and they're the number one product for sports media. So Nine being the home of Rugby League, Nine News Queensland, like our bulletin was pretty much 90% Broncos and 10% anything else.
Yep.
And one Christmas, it was around about this time, 5 years ago, I reckon it was 2018, I was on holidays and I was at a bowls club with some mates just having some beers, and Paul White walked in with his, I don't know, some friends or family and sat down at the table near us, and it just pinged. I was like, I've got to find a way to introduce myself and have a few beers with Paul. But I didn't.
It's got to be your bush background coming through there.
Well, he's a Charleville boy,
Yep.
200 k's from Brisbane, 200 kilometres from Quilpie. So, and
Practically grew up in the same town.
exactly, maybe just 30 years apart. But where the opportunity presented itself was, of all places, in the men's toilet. So I was actually leaving, and my mates had left, and I was like, I'm just going to go to the toilet, genuinely going to the toilet. Yep. And when I was in there, Paul came in, and I just thought, I've got to
take my
say
chance.
g'day. And I was like, Paul, look, sorry, you don't know who I am, but I'll explain who I am. And I said, I just want to say g'day and meet you. And I put my hand out to shake
I was about to say, hopefully you didn't ask him
he looked
to
at me and he
shake
goes, mate, really, pleasure to meet you. I'm not shaking your hand in here. And then he goes, are you hanging around? Why don't you come join us, have a couple of beers? I'm here with my son-in-law and someone else. He goes, come have a beer with us. I was like, oh, okay, sure, no worries. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. And I ran out to the car park and I said to my mates, I was like, boys, we've got to go back inside. And so two of my mates stayed with me, and then as the night panned out, Paul lived around the corner, and we ended up back at his house having a few beers, and just it just set things up, opened up some doors for me when I was still at the newsroom back then. He's not the CEO of the Broncos anymore, but we still got a decent relationship, and he became a bit of a mentor for a while as well.
Yeah, nice. I like that story.
You got to take your opportunities.
You definitely do, and I respect him even
while the urine is hot.
Oh, but I'm ching.
Sorry.
I respect him even more for not shaking your hand in the men's toilets too. Your mother would not be proud, Michael.
Maybe she would.
Yeah, she'd be proud of the introduction.
Yeah.
What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you always want to do this? I should probably know the answer to this.
Nah, I don't reckon I started to fantasize or
visualize,
think about becoming a sports journalist at late high school.
Mm-hmm.
But for a long time I wanted to be a doctor. A very long time.
Yeah, right.
I'm not sure why. I think maybe I just thought doctors made really good money. I think that was the main reason. But I was never studious enough probably smart enough, I think, if I can pump my own tyres like that, but I'm not a studier.
Definitely not studious enough.
Yeah, I couldn't have done the study, hence why I've started 5 or 6 different courses and not finished them all.
Yep.
I think like most kids, like a lot of kids, I wanted to be a footy player for a long time, probably like primary school age. I was rugby league obsessed growing up in country Queensland, mad Broncos fan, mad Maroons fan, still am. So probably want to be a footy player for a while. But yeah, I think probably doctor was the first career goal I'd sort of put on a vision board. Not that I had a vision board.
The mental vision board.
Yeah.
The one in your head. Yep.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone starting out now that you wish you were told when you were just starting out?
Don't take no for an answer, and meet as many people as you can. Particularly in my industry, I'm sure it's big in virtually every industry, like networking connections is massive. The old saying of it's who you know, not what you know, is it's so incredibly true. You need to know some things content-wise.
You need to know what, yeah.
You need to know the what you do. It helps, but who you know and knowing people is so incredibly important. And it connects back to what you've asked about, knowingly or unknowingly planting seeds. You just never know where an introduction to someone, a connection to someone, can then become useful.
Yep.
And you don't use people. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't use people as stepping stones or commodities, but there is a huge amount of value in knowing people. So just meet as many people as you can.
It's more so if I'm hearing you correctly. It's more so taking advantage of when you have opportunities to meet new people and other people, do it. It's not about, being transactional or using them. It's, if you've got those opportunities, make the most of them and don't let them slip by. Is that more what you're trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
How do you define success today?
It's an excellent question because it's a very subjective thing, I think. But
so maybe I'll go back a step. How do you find success today, and how is that different from 10 years ago?
So success today is probably about work-life balance. First step is finding a job or a career that doesn't feel like a job or a career, and I'm very fortunate to be one of those people. Again, leaning on an old saying, do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, that's me. I'm not. Another
reason you're a guest on this show.
And that's not. I'm not one of those people who can just do a job and. I tip my hat to these people who can do a job and get a paycheck, and that's just like they work Monday to Friday for their time off or whatever. Like there's people out there who do that, and I actually respect it because I've tried to do that. I've worked different jobs, whether they were casual jobs or maybe hoping they were the beginning of a career. And if I don't like what I'm doing for work, it weighs heavily on me. I can't get out of bed. I have cold sweats. So I'm very fortunate to be one of those people who works a job that is basically a passion project. So for me to have that in my life is a huge, tick of success. But then also work-life balance. Like I'm a real family person, and by that I mean like I'm a people person. I like having people around. I love time with my family, my kids, my wife, etc. And so to be able to have a pretty decent balance of spending time with them, seeing the things that they need or want me to see, and milestones in their lives, at school, at kindy, that sort of stuff. Like actually being able to attend, 90% of them, or even 50% of those sort of things is, to me, that's successful, because of how highly I value having family and a village sort of network around me. I like being able to actually give back to that village, so I'm very much able to do that.
So one of my bugbears is work-life balance as a whole, because we all talk about it. What is your definition of work-life balance? You may have touched on it before. Is it that you're at 50% of their milestone events or 90%? What are those sort of rough guidelines or boundaries that you have that you can hop in bed at night and go, yep, I had work-life balance today?
I think it's probably being able to do at least either the morning or evening routine, breakfast, get ready for school and kindy drop off, and then the school pick up. Like doing at least one of those a day. If I can be present at home for one of those a day, then I feel like I've achieved that balance. And if I had to pick one or the other, probably the nighttime one, because I think as a kid in our family, for a big portion of my childhood, we didn't have family sit down and have dinner together. I think when I was younger, definitely, or at least with like mum and older siblings, but
so just to interrupt the pub days, we definitely, so all I remember is that we sat down every night, because I'm a bit older than Michael, at dinner, but we had a change and mum and dad went into a pub, so
during that period we definitely didn't have that, which like sidebar, but mum has acknowledged to me, and I think she acknowledges that period for me was tough. Like I was at a vulnerable age, like 7 to 12, and mum and dad weren't really around because they were busy.
Because they were working and building really the business
hard.
up. And,
they were doing that for us as well. But
absolutely.
So back to my current situation, like I do really enjoy being around for the nighttime routine, as chaotic as it can be and often is with 3 boys. Sophie, my wife, really drives we sit at dinner and we have a conversation of what was the best part about your day? What was it, something challenging from your day? Did you do something kind for someone today? Did someone do something kind for you today? And I love that, but I'd never be the person who would drive that. So if I get to be a part of that most days, then I feel like I've got that work-life balance.
Yeah, nice. Now we're going to go over the grid. So a couple of potentially bumpy quickfire questions.
Sure.
As we all know, going over the grid is always bumpy, no matter what part of the bush you're in. First thing you do when you wake up?
Check my phone.
Oh God, lucky I'm not coaching you.
I'm trying to weed that out, but yes, I still do it.
Can I make a suggestion? Triple on your iPhone, triple the on-off button, and it goes black and white, so it at least takes all of the, I can't remember the bad lights out of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it makes a difference, huge difference. Ever experienced burnout?
Yeah, plenty of times.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you have a self-care routine to try to reduce the amount of time?
Not really a routine. I probably need to find one. But I need to exercise regularly. If I don't exercise a couple of days a week, whether that's going for a run or going to the gym or both, then I find I really notice that I deteriorate or burn out more quickly if I don't go to the gym for a couple of weeks.
Yep. So that is a self-care routine.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to find a daily one though.
I've got self-care tools, but I just don't have like a daily routine or a weekly routine.
And I would encourage you to get one, but we're all on our own journeys and this is a non-judgment space. Mental health.
We don't judge.
Sorry?
We listen, we don't judge.
No, we're all on our own journeys.
Yeah. No,
mental health.
It's a TikTok craze at the moment.
What is?
We listen, we don't judge.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I'm old. I'm not on TikTok. Do you identify as suffering from mental health?
Yeah. Yep. I have been at least informally diagnosed with, when I say informally, it's because a psychologist gave me this diagnosis, but there was no like paperwork or a certificate.
Yeah.
So I'm never really sure if it was like a diagnosis, but I have anxiety brought on by obsessive compulsive thinking. Like I just get stuck on a thought and I just obsess over a thought and obsess and often they're negative thoughts, and because I obsess of them so much they feel real, and then that feeds into anxiety and feeds into depression. So I've been dealing with that for almost a decade and a half, I think, but I only had that diagnosis in the last 3 years.
Yeah. So most people would probably be surprised to learn that. How have you, or what do you do to still be successful in the rest of your life, to not let that debilitate you too much? There's always times with mental health where we are going to be debilitated. That's part of it. Yeah. What do you do though to be able to pick yourself back up and just try and stay healthy?
There's certain situations that I try not to put myself in or try to control, which is a little bit counterproductive. The actual way to conquer those things is to put yourself in those situations and relinquish control, but
you're not meant to do it before you're ready though.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to just like dive in and then you end up spiraling, which is not a term I like, but set you back a bit more. So I travel a lot with work, which means I stay in hotels a lot, and a recent obsessive compulsive thought I've developed in the last few years is like a fear of, it's not a fear of heights, but it's an obsession with like being in a high-rise building and like
something going wrong at that height.
Something going wrong. If I have a panic attack, how do I get out? And then like I think I obsess over the impulse of like, well, the quickest way to just get out would be just to jump, and like not saying that it's not a suicidal ideation or a desire, but it's just like, and then I will obsess over that. I'm like, well, but like if you have a panic attack, would you actually do that? And so I just get very uncomfortable, I freak out, and I don't like. So I challenge myself to go to high-rise buildings, offices, etc. when I have to, but when I travel, I request low level because I just don't want to have to deal with like having a shit night's sleep or feeling really anxious the night before. I've then got to go on TV and host a broadcast, that sort of thing. It's a bit of a running joke among my colleagues, but I'm happy for it to be for the humour side of it to live out. But yeah, like there's those sort of things that I try to sort of control where I can. A lot of my approach to it is a bit like the never, don't take no for an answer. Like I just will myself through a situation where I feel like I'm overcome with nerves or whatever, or I'm about to go on air and I'm like, what if you say the wrong thing? And then I might obsess over that, which doesn't really happen, but that's how that's
how it works.
Disorder, for want of a better term, works for me. I just sort of like white knuckle it through it, which some people might not advise, but it works for me. And I find that I kind of love that challenge of like taking on something that's scary, and proving to myself that I can do it. Like I MC a lot of events and stuff, like lunches, dinners, charity events, that sort of stuff. And like I think it's probably fair to say I'm pretty accomplished at it, but every single time I do it, and I've been doing it for nearly 10 years, I shit myself. And I'm like, I can't do this. Why do I put myself through this? I'm going to bomb. It's going to be terrible. I'm going to, embarrass myself, and these people are going to be so filthy that they hired me. And my wife, Sophie's like, you do this every time, and then you come home and you're like, I crushed it. That was so good, blah, blah, blah. And I just sort of like embrace the fact that like, this is scary, but if you take on something that's scary, you're going to grow. So
I like it.
Kind of
this is scary, but if you take on something that's scary, you're going to grow. Yep. Growth happens on the other side of fear.
That's right.
Best thing you learnt from your worst boss?
I'm trying to think who my worst boss was.
It doesn't have to be one if there's not.
Yeah, I probably didn't have too many, or they were in roles that a bit insignificant to me. But I think, like at times I've been a shit employee, so I probably learnt in those times like what's acceptable and what's not acceptable from a work point of view. Yeah, so I think like at times I've probably learnt from bosses I didn't get along with, probably because of my behaviour. Yep. Like what was expected of an employee. What you can do
differently next time. Yep. Best thing you learnt from your best boss, or one of your best bosses?
Is probably through their actions, like the humility of helping others grow, even if it may one day come back to bite you in the arse. Like in my industry, it's pretty competitive. There's only, everyone wants to be the face of a program or on the desk reading and presenting something, but there's only very finite number of those roles, and almost an infinite number of people trying to get them. And the best people I've worked with or worked under in those roles are the ones who are happy to train you to maybe one day take over, knowing that like it's going to do them out of a job.
But they're happy to pay it forward.
Yeah, they're happy to pay it forward, and that's the way I've approached my media career. Like you get a lot of interns or whatever, and people reach out, can I come do work experience? I'm always happy to give that time back, because so many people, a lot more than not, were willing to give me their time and their advice early days of my career.
Yeah, I like to hear that you're paying it forward. That doesn't always happen. How do you keep regional Australia thriving, or how do we keep in general?
I haven't really thought about that, because I probably don't live it as much as I should.
So let's change it. That's true. How do you get your book? Yeah.
Well, I think as Australians, we're like, generally speaking, we're obsessed with travel. You know, we're quite known globally for travelling around the world and that sort of thing. I don't think we do it enough in our own backyard. I think that's a way we can keep regional Australia thriving. My in-laws are very well-travelled people, usually every year go on a 4-week trip somewhere overseas. And during COVID, couldn't do that, so they started just packing up their car and driving to regional parts of Queensland. And, you know, went out to parts where I grew up and that sort of thing. And, like, I love being able to connect with them. I've got a very good relationship with them, but connect even more so through them doing those experiences. And they still do it now. Like, yes, they can go travelling overseas again, and they do, but they still get in the car and go somewhere, regional New South Wales. I think they went to South Australia this year.
Nice.
And did a big trip, like out through Western Queensland, down through South Australia, maybe a bit of Western New South Wales before or after that, back through Victoria, and then came up the East Coast. So
once they saw some of regional Australia, they liked it so much they kept going.
One of their favourite places in the world is Cairns, because their oldest daughter and her husband, in the medical fraternity, they did a residency up there for 12 months, so they went and visited, and they're in love with Cairns. They love Port Douglas, they love that area. And my father-in-law had his 70th birthday celebration up there, like everyone went up for a weekend and that sort of stuff. So I think if we can encourage people to go and see their own backyard as much as they want to go and see someone else's backyard, that's a way we can keep regional Australia thriving. Because it's beautiful. You don't see some of the things that regional Australia has, you don't see anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely.
The same way you go to Egypt to see the pyramids, because they're not anywhere else in the world. There are things in Australia that you can't find anywhere else in the world. It's cheaper and easier to get to.
Absolutely. Now for a bit of reflection. So we always talk about what would you tell your 20-year-old self, but I want to flip that, because when we're successful people, quite often we're always striving for the next success or the next promotion or the next role, and we don't stop to actually look at how far we've come and what we've already achieved. So what would your 20 or even 28-year-old self, what would they say if they could see you right now, where you are, what you're doing and what you've achieved?
I think my 28-year-old self would probably say, like, well done, that happened faster than you thought it would.
What would they be most surprised about?
That I live in Sydney
Yeah.
now, probably.
What would they be most... Sorry?
Well, I think moving interstate always felt like it was going to happen at some point, but because this, it's a bigger market, bigger media industry, etc., bigger roles. But I also probably didn't believe it would ever happen. And at times I was really content with where I was in the Brisbane media landscape and maybe carving out a career just solely there. Yeah. So probably surprised at how quickly this opportunity came up and how quickly, not just myself but my whole family jumped at it to take on the change.
What would they be most embarrassed about, do you think?
My 28-year-old self be most embarrassed about... Other than back hair.
That can be it. And what would they be most proud of?
Probably the persistence, the perseverance, and the proactive nature that I've gone about my career, not resting on laurels or waiting for things to come to me, like going after things and trying not to get complacent in my roles, and with my skill set and stuff like that. Like that's one of my greatest fears, is that I think I'm here now, I'm sweet, I don't need to grow or improve, and because I think I'm inherently a lazy person, so I kind of really whip myself into gear to try and get work done. I'm a procrastinator, that sort of stuff. It's one of my greatest fears.
Oh, Mikey, we need to have a coaching session. Change the way you're looking at that.
Yeah, but I don't let that happen. I do get myself into gear to get things done, and I'm always looking to try and improve to some degree, or pick the brains of other people who I think do it better than me or have done it longer than me. So I think they'd be proud of that. 28-year-old me would be proud of that.
Sorry?
28-year-old me would be proud of that.
What does Michael need more of to keep growing in 2025? Or do more of?
Money.
That's not where real growth comes from. Wrong podcast.
No. I jest. Michael needs more constructive criticism. I'm not saying that like people are withholding. Maybe they just there isn't necessarily constructive criticism, but like I'm a bit negatively geared. I think like I want someone to be like, that wasn't good enough, or you could have done it that way, you know, because that's the way I am always thinking about my performances or my roles or that sort of thing. And even at home, you know, like I probably do get it at home. Like Sophie's more than happy to say, hey, look, I feel like you're not doing this, or conversely, like I've noticed you're really doing this, and I really appreciate it. So I think professionally I would like a bit more of that.
Yep. Just on a side note, do you know how to effectively ask for feedback? Constructive feedback?
I don't know. I do ask. I just ask.
Have you got feedback?
Yeah, I get feedback sometimes, but like it is a bit of a
No, sorry, I'm saying, is that what your question is? Have you got feedback for me? Is that how you ask for it?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, so can I make a suggestion? To get more constructive feedback, I'm going to give it anyway.
Yeah.
What could I do differently next time to improve on that?
Okay.
You'll just tend to get a more constructive response.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people don't know how to, or aren't comfortable giving that feedback, and just by shaping the way that question is, it's more comfortable for them to give you something to work on rather than making it something personal unintentionally.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, the bill's in the mail. Thank you for
my
your
appearance fee.
Yeah, I have a feeling yours will be more than mine. Thanks for making the time today, Michael, and being so open in your growth and transition journey and how you've got there, and the stepping stones and the successful failures and the challenges that you still have and overcome. So thank you for your time, and congratulations on where you've come. Can't wait to see where you get to.
Thanks, big sis.
See you, Michael.
Bye.